Her name was Debbie Dorian. She was a young university student whose life held immense potential. Unfolding in the city of Fresno, a community that believed in its own quiet security. The following is a recording of an emergency call. Go ahead, ma'am. My husband just called and went to his daughter's apartment. She didn't show and he found her dead in her apartment. Okay, tell me what your daughter's name is. Her name is Debbie Dorian. In August of 1996, that sense of security was shattered. What had been an ordinary summer descended into a season of dread, shaking the community to its foundations. According to official reports, Debbie's father discovered her body in her bedroom early that morning. A responding officer stated, "There is some very evil, demented predator out there. We didn't know if, when, and where he was going to strike again." In August 1996, Debbie Dorian was a recent graduate of California State University, Fresno. She lived by herself in the North Creek apartment complex, located 4 to 5 miles north of the campus. She was building a future in economics, contemplating graduate studies, and following a professional path influenced by her father, Peter Dorian. The neighborhood, populated primarily by university students, was seen as a safe haven, rarely affected by violent crime. On Thursday, August 22nd, Debbie was due at her father's house around 7 a.m. When she failed to arrive, Peter drove to her apartment. There was no response to his knock. He tested the doorknob and found it unlocked, an immediate and chilling warning sign. Debbie was known to be meticulous about her own safety. In that instant, Peter understood something was deeply wrong. Inside, Peter moved through each room of the apartment. He checked the living area first, then the dining space and kitchen, but he could not find Debbie. The television was on, its low sound echoing in the stillness of the home. He called her name over and over, but there was no reply. A growing sense of dread led him toward the back of the apartment and into her bedroom. There, he was confronted with the most harrowing scene any parent could ever witness. Debbie was on the carpeted floor of the bedroom. She lay on her side, motionless. She was partially unclothed, her shirt pushed up towards her chest. Her ankles had been bound with duct tape, and her hands were taped securely behind her back. Worse still, her entire head was encased in duct tape, wrapped from the crown of her skull down to her jaw. It completely covered her face, a clear and horrifying indication that she had been unable to breathe. For a fleeting second, a paternal instinct urged him to rip the tape away, but a deeper realization told him he was already far too late. Overwhelmed by shock and horror, he went to a phone inside the apartment to summon help, knowing his daughter was gone. In a state of panic, his first call was to his wife, who was Debbie's stepmother. She then made the call to 911. The dispatcher began the call. "Go ahead, ma'am." My husband just called and went to his daughter's apartment. She didn't show, and he found her dead in her apartment." "Okay, tell me what your daughter's name is." "Her name is Debbie Dorian." Shortly after, Peter made a second, shattering call to Debbie's mother, Sarah Lovin, to deliver the news that would fracture their family. She recalled her reaction. "I ran, screaming through the house. No, 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 no. And that's all I could say was no, no, no." The discovery of the body brought a swift response from investigators and law enforcement, drawing the worried attention of the community. Police observed no evidence of forced entry and no significant signs of a struggle, which suggested the assailant was either let in voluntarily or established control at the doorway. Investigators sensed immediately this was not a random crime. The methodical way Debbie was restrained suggested a deliberate, controlled attacker. The coroner would later confirm that she died of asphyxiation caused by the duct tape sealing her airways. A forensic specialist described the evidence. There was semen found on the victim, and then there was saliva sample that was found, and they came from the same source. They were the same individual. That genetic profile was uploaded to the national database, but it returned no match. Although they possessed crucial forensic evidence, investigators had no one to connect it to. The case went cold, irked by frustration, dead ends, and the disquieting awareness of an unidentified killer remaining at large. Debbie Dorian's murder sent a shockwave of fear through Fresno. A tremor felt most intensely around the Fresno State campus. Students mourned, suddenly forced to question their own sense of security. A city that prided itself on being a tight-knit and protected community now had to face a much harsher reality. A detective spoke on the case. "You're on camera, guys." Authorities initiated their investigation by deconstructing Debbie Dorian's life and piecing together her final days. He continued, "Debbie was killed between roughly 12 and 4 in the afternoon on August the 20th, 1996. One neighbor recalled seeing an unknown white male at Debbie's front door. He spoke with her briefly. The man was never identified. The description provided was too general to pursue. The absence of a break-in was immediate. It suggested the killer was known to the victim, so investigators began with the men in Debbie's life, starting with her boyfriend, John Thomas. As of August 1996, we've been dating approximately 2.5 years. It's hard to hear things said about this person that you love that been murdered. His connection to Debbie made him an immediate person of interest. Thomas was cooperative, providing a voluntary DNA sample, but his alibi was absolute. Employment records confirmed he was in Northern California, battling a wildfire when the murder occurred. His genetic material did not match the evidence collected from the scene, and he was formally eliminated as a suspect. In subsequent interviews, John Thomas provided investigators with a crucial piece of information. In the weeks before she was killed, Debbie had been frantically looking for someone to share her apartment. "I think she was getting desperate. She needed to get some finances so that she could pay her bills. She needed somebody soon." She had placed advertisements and posted flyers near the Fresno State campus, and on her dining room table, authorities found a list containing the names of prospective roommates. That document became a catalog of persons of interest, and one name quickly drew their focus: Alvin. After news of Debbie's death became public, Alvin contacted the police himself, explaining that he had met with her and paid a deposit. He stated he had also signed a rental agreement, but had not yet received a key to the apartment. Although he did not fit a neighbor's description of a white male at Debbie's door, a background check returned a deeply disturbing fact. He was a registered sex offender. It was an alarming discovery given the nature of the crime. "What did you do when you went there?" "I locked the door." Invited me in." "What time was it that you got there?" 6-7. Alvin also stated that he had returned to the apartment after his calls to Debbie went unanswered because he was concerned about his money. He admitted he tried the doorknob and found it unlocked. "Wednesday night, I knocked the door with my answer. Blinds were open, the TV was on, what I can feel on the wall. I knocked the door of my answer. I char." He insisted he never went inside the residence, a detail that detectives found unusual. When asked for his alibi, Alvin provided another name, Maurice, which added a new layer of complexity to an already tangled case. Alvin and Maurice Dixon, who were friends and colleagues at a local grocery store, became the new focal point of the inquiry. Maurice was a 28-year-old Army veteran with no criminal history who acknowledged driving Alvin to Debbie's apartment complex and waiting for him. He maintained that he never met Debbie, never set foot in her home, and claimed he only saw her face for the first time on news reports. "So, you've never seen this girl? Don't know what she looks like? I never talked to her." "No, not from all this started happening at first. You know, I never seen her or just heard her voice on the phone." During his interrogation, Maurice made an unsolicited statement that he had recently purchased 2 rolls of duct tape to secure a rope on his punching bag, and this volunteer detail aroused deep suspicion. The investigators had never revealed that duct tape or restraints were part of the evidence. "What made you mention?" Somebody mentioned duct tape or something like that. "Do you have any duct tape, or do you know anything about duct tape or something?" "What was that?" That was when I first came." A search of Maurice's home did reveal duct tape on a punching bag, but forensic analysis confirmed it did not match the tape from the crime scene. DNA testing also excluded Alvin, clearing him. Maurice's DNA, on the other hand, could not be excluded. The finding directly contradicted his claim that he had never been inside Debbie's apartment. Maurice denied any wrongdoing, but the evidence at hand led to his arrest. He was taken into custody in a public setting and charged with the murder of Debbie Dorian. I think it's great. Hey, hopefully it's the right person. But the case was about to pivot on a stunning development, born from advancements in forensic science as the DNA evidence was re-examined. The initial analysis had relied on just 6 genetic markers, but a more powerful test using 13 markers was now available. The results were definitive. The DNA profile from the Debbie Dorian crime scene was not a match to Maurice Dixon. After spending just over 2 weeks incarcerated, he was exonerated, the charges were dropped, and he was released from custody. Maurice Dixon had been imprisoned for a little more than 14 days. He was now a free man, and the investigation into the murder of Debbie Dorian had returned to square one. A $60,000 reward for information was offered to the public following Debbie's murder. Her mother, Sarah, relentlessly pursued justice, securing a personal promise from investigator Vince Zavala. For him, the case was now a personal mission. I made a commitment to her I would never quit. And she asked me, "Well, what about when you retire?" I says, "Well, I won't retire. I won't retire till I solve it." Zavala and the Fresno police force worked without pause, running down every possibility in their determined search for answers. For years, the Debbie Dorian murder investigation remained confined to Fresno, producing no significant leads. A breakthrough finally came after the DNA profile from her case was entered into the National CODIS database, which returned a match to a 1999 case from Visalia, a city about an hour south. In the 3 years that followed, several other crimes bearing a similar signature occurred in the Visalia area. Investigators believed a single suspect was responsible for these crimes, described as a white male in his 30s, somewhere between 5'6" and 6 feet tall with a medium build, who used a handgun to threaten his victims while obscuring his face with a hoodie or bandana. One of those attacked was a young woman named Beth. At 19 years old, she was newly independent and had moved to California's Central Valley to follow her dream of working with horses. One evening, as she rode her bike home from work, and I saw a gentleman pull out of a street. It was 10:30 at night. There was nobody on the road. He grabbed my handlebars and had a gun. The assailant seized her bicycle's handlebars and threatened her with a firearm, forcing her compliance. Beth was then sexually assaulted, but she survived the ordeal. She made it to her apartment, and within minutes of her call for help, police were on the scene. Beth was later able to lead investigators to the precise location of the crime, which allowed them to collect critical DNA evidence. It would be years before Beth would discover that her attacker was also the man who had murdered Debbie Dorian. That single piece of information reframed the entire experience. What was done to Debbie could have just as easily happened to any of them. In the moments directly following her assault, Beth was sustained by a single, resolute promise she made to herself. "I'm gonna get you. You're not gonna get away with it." And over the next 3 years, more women in Visalia were attacked under nearly identical circumstances. It was only after this series of assaults that investigators finally perceived a clear pattern and concluded they were hunting a single offender. The biological evidence recovered from Beth's case was submitted to the National CODIS database to be compared against other crimes. That submission yielded a crucial case-to-case hit. The DNA from the Visalia assaults was identical to the DNA recovered from the scene of Debbie Dorian's murder. For the first time since her death, investigators had proof that the killer had been active in Visalia. In 2018, the cold case found new purpose after a significant arrest, and another matter demonstrated the power of genetic genealogy. This raised a critical question. Could the same technique be applied to the Debbie Dorian murder investigation? With guidance from the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office, Fresno detectives were provided a roadmap to proceed. Using this new method, They began to construct a family tree for their unknown suspect, and within a week, a promising lead emerged and matched perfectly. And I'm looking at the photograph of the suspect. I'm like, this is our guy. This really is. The team was certain they had finally identified their subject. Through genetic genealogy, investigators honed in on a suspect, Nikki Dwayne Stain. On the surface, he was an ordinary family man, steadily employed, with no criminal record, and a presence in his local community. On the surface, he did seem like, your next-door neighbor. Detectives theorized that this facade of normalcy was what had allowed him to operate undetected for so long. For confirmation, Vince and his partner organized a covert operation to obtain the suspect's DNA without arousing his suspicion. Posing as sanitation workers, they collected his trash after he had discarded items, finding used razor blades which they believed would carry his DNA. 2 weeks later, the lab results were in. The DNA was a match. Nikki Stain was our 147th individual who we obtained a DNA sample from for comparison, and he was the match. At the Visalia Mall, detectives approached Nikki Stain at his workplace to interview him. They questioned if he knew a Debbie Dorian or if he had ever perpetrated violence against another person. Her name was Debbie Dorian. She was found murdered. You didn't kill her, did you? No. But Stain denied having any connection and declined to give a DNA sample, claiming he was not sure he wanted to. Just as the interview seemed to be concluding, Stain unexpectedly stopped and looked directly at Vince and said, "Yeah, I hope you find him. I hope we do catch the guy, and thank you. Have a good day." As Stain turned to walk away, the arrest team that was staged nearby began to close in. The moment he re-entered the mall, they moved in and took him into custody within seconds, placing him in handcuffs on the spot. "Nikki, stay your back. Turn around, man." He was charged with assaults in Visalia that were linked to the Debbie Dorian investigation. Vince immediately contacted Sarah Dorian to deliver the news they had long awaited. She, in turn, informed friends and family. After so many years of uncertainty, a suspect was finally in custody. Following Nikki Stain's arrest in connection with the Visalia assaults, detectives began their interrogation. They expected a man who would resist them, but were met with an unexpected and unusual candor. From the outset, Stain confirmed he understood why he was there. He confessed to a pattern of approaching women in public and coercing them into unwanted sexual acts. As investigators presented the details of each separate assault, he would pause. Yet, he often conceded his own involvement was a possibility. The narration ends, and a direct quote begins. "That might happen. I think that one happened." The narration ends, and a direct quote begins. "I say that sounds like me, but I don't think that was me." The narration resumes. His pattern of evasive responses raised immediate and serious concerns for investigators. He stated that he wore a hoodie during these attacks, a detail that aligned with descriptions provided by the victims. Stain also admitted to a long history of sexual addiction and promiscuity, speaking with a boastful tone about numerous prostitutes he had engaged with since his time in high school. The narration ends, and a direct quote begins. "If you have my phone, you'll be able to see that because it has like 400 videos on it of probably 100 different women." He appeared to take a strange pride in this lifestyle, expressing no sense that hiring escorts or having sugar babes was wrong. He even described his bedroom, stating it resembled something from 50 Shades of Grey. Throughout the duration of the interview, his frank admissions and the disturbing details he provided offered investigators a chilling insight into the psyche of the man responsible for these crimes, confirming he was profoundly different from the ordinary neighbor he appeared to be. A search of Nikki Stain's residence revealed silk robes and sex toys located in his closet. Investigators also discovered he was running an Airbnb, renting rooms to younger women for whom he claimed to be a provider. A fraudulent Facebook profile was uncovered where he presented himself as Nick Steele. In this online persona, he claimed to be the chairman of a Fortune 500 company, an alter ego rooted entirely in fantasy. He would post videos that showcased his nightlife. The narration ends, and a direct quote begins. "Okay, I'm going out tonight." The intent was not necessarily to lure women, but rather to project a certain lifestyle and attract attention. A deeply disturbing discovery was a hidden camera, disguised as a wall plug, in a roommate's bathroom. It was linked to a young female tenant, which led to charges of voyeurism and a misdemeanor peeping Tom violation. Stain, however, pleaded not guilty, and the charge was later dropped. His sexual deviancies were undeniable, but his defense attorneys argued that these behaviors were not proof of guilt for murder. An unusual pattern had emerged. While the assaults and voyeurism continued, the associated violence appeared to de-escalate over time. During the interrogation, when the conversation turned to Debbie Dorian, Stain first denied knowing her. He then changed his story, admitting they had met on several occasions for what he termed consensual sexual interactions. The narration ends, and a direct quote begins. "So, to be honest with you, she was, I picked her up on the streets there at one time." The narration ends, and a direct quote begins. "After I dropped her off, I thought that was going to be the last time I seen of her." He alleged that she subsequently visited his workplace multiple times to request sexual encounters. This account was strongly disputed by prosecutors as the defense team began its preparations for trial. The narration ends, and a direct quote begins. Nikki Dwayne Stain is the primary suspect in the rape and murder of Debbie Dorian. Within the courtroom, the positions of the prosecution and defense were starkly defined, with each side presenting its case with absolute conviction. Among those who testified was a neighbor, and her account would prove to be crucial. She described seeing a white male at Debbie's door on the day she died. The description she gave matched Nikki Stain. The encounter, she noted, did not seem confrontational. The neighbor then testified that Debbie let the man inside her home. This one detail became a pivotal point in the case. Part of the evidence presented was a list. It was found on Debbie's kitchen table and contained the names of potential roommates. One name on that list, though scratched out, was still legible. It was Stain's name, next to a note that read, "Call Tuesday, 12 o'clock." The investigators' theory was that Stain had contacted Debbie about the apartment and arranged a visit. They believe he was invited inside her home that day, initiating an encounter that would become central to the entire case. Two of the Visalia assault victims also testified at the hearing. For one woman, seeing Nikki Stain in court triggered an immediate recognition. It was his eyes and his voice. Things, she stated, you would never forget. The moment she heard him speak, she was certain. The narration ends, and a direct quote begins. That's it. The narration ends, and a direct quote begins. Holy crap, that's it. The narration resumes. Prosecutors then presented what they considered a crucial piece of evidence. Recorded phone calls made by Nikki Stain from the Tulare County Jail. In these monitored conversations with his family, Stain spoke without restraint. He acknowledged his past crimes and expressed a clear acceptance of his fate, implying an expectation that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Are you innocent of any of those crimes? No, not really, Mom. I was kind of like involved in all of them. The defense, however, insisted that he made no confession to the murder of Debbie Dorian throughout the official interrogations. While defense attorneys contested aspects of the police work, the prosecution argued the DNA evidence was irrefutable. At the scene, investigators recovered genetic material from only two individuals, Debbie Dorian and Nikki Stain. The court determined there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial, and the state announced its intention to seek the death penalty. Just weeks after, a change occurred. Stain accepted an agreement to plead guilty to murder, which would result in a sentence of life without parole and the dismissal of the other charges. Debbie's mother fought the arrangement, insisting that he must be held accountable for the full scope of his crimes. In a final turn, Nikki Stain elected to plead guilty to every charge. This decision concluded the matter without a trial. What follows is from the court record. Unlawfully, and was for committed murder against Deborah, Sarah, and Dorian, Mr. Street, guilty. In return, the state withdrew its pursuit of capital punishment. Stain was officially convicted for the murder of Deborah Sarah Dorian, receiving a sentence of life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. Debbie was always more than a case file. She was a living person, a young woman who knew both happiness and hardship. Her family had borne the weight of nearly 29 years of uncertainty. Those were years consumed by waiting, by grieving, by hoping, and by a steadfast refusal to let her be forgotten before justice was finally rendered. It marked the end of a painful chapter that had remained open for nearly 3 decades. For investigator Vince Zavala and all who persisted, this was not just a case resolution. It was a promise fulfilled. A promise that no person would be forgotten, no crime would go unanswered, and no perpetrator would ultimately escape consequence. As Nikki Stain began to face the outcome of his actions, a community could start to heal. Debbie's memory is now defined not by her death, but as a testament to resilience, love, and the enduring force of truth. This is the story of justice, long delayed. But it was not, in the end, denied. It is a story of hope emerging from profound darkness, reminding us that no matter how much time passes, the truth will find its way to the surface, and healing can follow. Justice never sleeps. Her name was Debbie Dorian, a young woman full of dreams, building her future in economics, planning for graduate school, driven by ambition and love for life. She was someone's daughter, someone's girlfriend, someone's everything. And then, in one devastating August afternoon, she was gone. For nearly 29 years, her family carried a wound that never closed. 29 years of sleepless nights, of unanswered questions, of a grief too heavy to put into words. Her mother ran screaming through the house when she heard the news. That kind of pain doesn't simply fade, it lives in you, every single day. But here's what Debbie's story teaches us, powerfully and profoundly. Truth is patient. Justice is persistent. The investigators never stopped. The evidence never lied. And when modern DNA technology finally connected the dots, the man who thought he had escaped consequence faced the full weight of his actions. Debbie's memory is not defined by how she died. It is defined by the love that refused to let her be forgotten, and by the justice that ultimately refused to be denied. Her story is a reminder to every community, every student, every family. Stay vigilant, trust the process, and never give up on truth. Because no matter how long the darkness lasts, the light always finds a way through. For Debbie, for every Debbie,